Hi, welcome to Watch It Played. My name is Rodney Smith, and in this video we're going to learn the 2 to 5 player game, Wasteland Express Delivery Service, designed by Jonathan Gilmour, Ben Pinchback, and Matt Riddle, and published by Pandasaurus Games. A post-apocalyptic wasteland was never going to be an easy trucking route, especially with marauding raiders around every corner. But you're not getting paid because the job is easy. Instead, you're going to have to haul your wares to complete contracts despite all of the dangers, in the hopes of a lucrative payout and the chance to live another day. So join me at the table and let's learn how to play. Before getting started, I should point out that the components of this game store neatly into the included game trays, many of which will just drop onto the table ready to play out of for faster setup. First though, you'll start with these terrain tiles, which you'll shuffle and arrange randomly in a 4x4 grid like I've done here. These are double-sided, but essentially the same on both sides, so use whichever one you want and in any orientation. There are several of these location tiles, and from them separate out the one labeled the depot, and these 4 known as Raider Enclaves. This depot is always put into the central space, and these 4 Raider Enclaves are always put into the 4 spaces that I'm placing them now. However, this order doesn't always have to be kept the same. The only important thing is that the 9-9 and the railmen are always opposite one another. The remaining locations should then be shuffled and, as I've done here, placed into all of the remaining spaces. These are the 3 Raider trucks, and the game comes with stickers that you can attach to their sides. Place them randomly on the center space of any 3 corner tiles, and keep in mind that their facing doesn't matter. We'll learn about these specific components more as we get into the rules, but for now, place these trays nearby with their correct contents as indicated by the instructions that come in the game. This is the market board, and these are the symbols for food, water, and weapon cargo. Now place a matching colored plastic piece onto each of those spaces. On each of these spaces, except for the one labeled $7, place one of these artifact counters like I've done here. Then stack any extras onto this final space. These are the supply counters, which should be randomized face down. Then draw one to put randomly face up onto each location tile with a matching supply space like this. You'll find 4 locations needing these kinds of tokens. These are the demand tiles, which you'll also want to mix up. Then randomly put one face up into each location with a demand space like this. If you would ever draw a demand token that shows 2 symbols, replace it with a new one until only single symbols appear on the board, and any that you replaced are then shuffled back into the tray. You'll have added 11 of these demand tokens to the board, and now you total each type of cargo shown on them, moving the matching token that number of spaces forward on this wheel. For example, we see 4 of these weapon demand tokens, so its marker would move forward 4 spaces. Water has 3 of those tokens, so it goes forward 3 spaces, and there are 4 locations that are demanding food, so that token advances by 4. Now pick a Raider truck and draw a card from the Raider truck deck, placing into the back of that vehicle the cargo that is shown here in the upper right-hand corner. Now do this for the other 2 trucks, drawing a new card for each, and then shuffle those 3 drawn cards back into their deck. Now each player chooses a dashboard to represent their character, or they can be assigned randomly. I'll be setting up a 2-player game here, so I'll return these to the box. Using the images found here and here, each player now takes their matching truck, standees, and progress tokens. Their colored standees go onto these 3 spaces of their player dashboard, and then each player's truck should be placed on the central depot. These tokens make up the currency of the game and are referred to as scrap and come in denominations of 1, 5, and 10. Now give each player a total value of $10 in scrap. From the mod shop, give each player one of these general and weapon storage tokens. Then check your unique character bonuses here. You'll collect those named items as well. In this case, a rad shield and a missile token. Each mod you have must be placed into any one of these spaces of your truck, but never here unless it's specifically this armor token. Also keep in mind that no more than 1 token can be put into any one space. These are the action markers, and each player should collect 5 to put into this available space of their dashboard. You'll also find trays for the cards of the game, and in each, shuffle a face-down deck for the 3 faction jobs, allies, raider truck, and Enclave cards. These should all be kept within easy reach. Each player should now draw 1 card from each faction job deck, and without showing the other players, they'll choose one to keep, discarding the other 2 to the bottoms of their respective decks. These are the priority first class contract cards. Set aside the one titled Blue Screen of Death and shuffle the rest together, randomly drawing 2 to also set aside. All the rest of them can then be returned to the box. The 3 revealed contracts should then be placed face up near the playing area. If one of your contracts refers to a Vision Quest, then you'll also use this deck. And if one refers to Grand Lord Emperor Torque, set this card out. Otherwise, these components can be returned to the box. From this events deck, set aside the card labeled Welcome to the Wasteland and shuffle the rest face down, putting this one on top, and then giving this tray to a randomly selected first player. Also set out this mod shop board nearby for easy reference. And that's the setup. In Wasteland Express Delivery Service, players will be collecting and delivering goods, upgrading their trucks, and fighting raiders, all in an effort to be the first to complete 3 priority first-class contracts, which will win you the game. These important contracts are identified by these stamped symbols found both on public ones that any player can fulfill or on private ones that you might collect later, like this. These all require performing tasks like delivering goods, attacking certain locations, or paying large sums of scrap. And those requirements are printed on the contracts, but also detailed further in the rulebook if you have any questions. Either way, once you complete a priority contract, you'll put one of your colored standees on it. Each contract you complete must be done on a different card, and once you've placed your 3rd colored standee in this way, you win the game. The game is played over a series of rounds, starting with the first player who will take the event deck and then reveal the top card from it, reading it, and then resolving it. The top event of the first round is always the same and has no effect. But in a future round, you'll get something like this that would require some type of action. Either way, once resolved, it is either discarded now or at the end of the round if it has an ongoing effect. If you would ever need to draw an event and there isn't one left, reshuffle the discard pile into a new face-down deck to draw from. After the event is drawn, now players will take turns, starting with the first player and then going clockwise around and around the table. And on your turn, you'll perform one of 6 possible actions. To take an action in the game, you'll need at least one of these markers in your available area. You then move it to the space representing the action that you want to take that turn, and then you resolve it. So let's learn the different actions, starting with movement. To do this, move an action marker to the leftmost available space of these 3 options. The number that you cover up is the number of spaces that you'll be able to move that turn, though you can choose to move fewer. The octagon-shaped terrain tiles are divided into a number of spaces known as zones. The central space here cannot be moved into or through by players, only raider trucks will go there. Square location tiles, like these ones, are also known as spaces. So with a movement of 3, a player could drive their truck like this. And notice that when moving from one space to another, you must always cross either the proper edge of a piece or the yellow lines that are marked on the tiles. In other words, you cannot move diagonally. Also keep in mind you can stop on or move through spaces with other trucks. This symbol on a tile indicates a special irradiated zone. It's very fast to move through because the entire tile is just one space. But as soon as you would enter it, you need to roll this rad check die. And if you get this symbol, then you take 1 damage and may continue moving or even stop in that space. Either way, you never roll this die when leaving this zone, only when you would enter it. When you take damage, place one of these damage tokens on any undamaged space of your truck, except for this armor space. This spot only takes damage if an armor upgrade token is already there, but we'll learn more about those a little bit later. Any other upgrade token covered by damage becomes inactive immediately. But if you later repair the damage, any upgrade underneath becomes active again. If you already have cargo in a space that you're going to damage, you must first return it to the supply before placing the marker. Likewise, if you have an artifact in a space that's going to be damaged, you also have to remove that first, but then it is sent to the last space of the artifact price chart. If no spaces are left to place damage tokens on, then ignore any extra that you would take. When moving, if you enter a Raider Enclave or a terrain tile with a Raider truck on it, you must pause for a moment and choose whether or not to engage those Raiders in combat or try to evade them. If you choose to evade, roll this Raider check die, and if you get this hit symbol, suffer 1 damage. You may then continue your movement, and any other spaces on the same tile that you would move through during this turn won't require you to roll the die again. However, if you leave that tile or enclave and then return to it during that same turn, then you'll have to roll the die again or choose to engage in combat. Remember, these checks only happen when you enter an enclave or a terrain tile with a Raider truck already on it. If you start your turn already within that tile, you can freely move there without having to roll the die. Now, if instead of evading, you choose to engage the Raiders, you'll end your movement immediately. Then slide the action marker you just used that turn from its current movement space to the combat area here. When fighting a truck, draw and reveal the top card from the Raider truck deck. Now roll 2 of these combat dice and total the number of hit symbols shown. In this case, we have a total of 4. Some upgrades to your truck might also let you roll more dice or gain extra hits, as we'll see later. But either way, if the total value equals or exceeds the defense value of the Raider as shown here, you are successful, and then move the action marker used this turn from the combat space to this pillage one. Now take the goods from the back of the Raider truck and add them to your cargo if you have room for them. A general storage upgrade like this in your truck can contain either 1 food or 1 water cargo in its space. A weapon storage upgrade like this can hold 1 weapon cargo. If you ever gain more cargo than you can currently hold, you can choose what you want to keep and return any excess to the general supply. Cargo can also be freely discarded at any time. I should also mention that artifact tokens can be held in either of these types of cargo upgrades, but again, only 1 per space. After you've taken a Raider's goods, refill that truck with the goods shown on its card, and then discard that card. If instead you were engaging an enclave, combat is resolved the same way, except you draw one of these cards. If you succeed in the combat roll, then add to your cargo the goods that are shown here. Then you'll discard that Raider Enclave card. In either case, if your roll fails against a Raider Enclave or a truck, you don't gain any goods and instead take 1 damage. Now let's go back to discussing movement. After you've finished moving, if there are any one of these 3 Raider icons on your space, you may move the corresponding Raider truck with that sticker on it from its current terrain tile to an adjacent one. If there's already a Raider in that space you'd want to move to, you may skip over it without changing direction, as long as there's an empty space on the other side. You could even skip over 2 Raiders this way. If there are now any players on the terrain tile that the Raider moved to, those players are ambushed. You'll now flip over the top card of the Raider truck deck, and in turn order, any players being ambushed will resolve their combat separately against this 1 card to determine if they take damage. As with other combat, each player will now roll 2 dice along with any bonuses from their upgrades, and if the total equals or exceeds the Raider's defense, they fend off the attack. Nothing else happens. No cargo is pillaged and no action tokens are moved on player boards. On the other hand, if a player fails, then they will suffer 1 damage. Once this combat is resolved, you'll then discard the Raider truck card. And I should mention that if you ever need to draw a Raider truck or enclave card and there isn't one, shuffle the required discard pile into a new face-down deck. Something to notice about movement is that each time you take that action, you'll be able to move more spaces. This represents the momentum that your truck is gaining as you continue to drive. However, as soon as one of your action markers gets assigned somewhere else, perhaps on a future turn you take a different action, or as part of a movement you engage some Raiders, any markers still in the movement space are immediately moved to this used pass area. Now, the next time you move, you won't go quite as fast. So just keep that in mind. Anytime you assign markers to a space other than movement, any markers still on movement go to the use past area. Taking movement as your action also provides you with an option no other action does. As soon as your movement ends, you may slide that action marker to any other applicable space on your board and perform that action as well. Effectively, you'll be getting 2 actions in one turn. Again, remember, if you do this and you have any other markers on the movement spaces, those immediately go here. The one exception is this bonus space. You cannot slide a marker there from movement. You'd have to spend your entire turn performing this action, and we'll see how that one works a little bit later. It's also important to note that all actions, except for combat and the used pass area, have limited spaces. That means you can only take those actions if a marker isn't already there. For example, as soon as you successfully pillage a raider truck or enclave, we said that an action marker moves from the combat area to the pillage spot. So now you will not be able to choose to attack raiders for the rest of this round because there's no space for another action marker in the pillage spot. That said, when you enter a space with raiders, although you can't choose to engage them, you'll still have to roll the raider check die, and if you're ambushed, you get to roll to try to fend off those attacks. But now that we've explained movement, let's move on to some of the other actions you can take. We saw that as a part of movement, you can stop and attack a raider of a space that you entered by sliding the movement marker used up to combat. However, if you start your turn in a space where you could engage a raider, then for that turn you can use your action marker strictly for combat by moving it directly to this space. Remember though, as always, if you had any markers on movement, those are immediately shifted down to the used pass area. And don't worry, I won't keep repeating that rule with each new action we discuss, but do keep that in mind. I should also point out that player trucks cannot attack each other. Another action you can take for your turn is to purchase cargo. But notice that you can only do this once per round, and you'll need to be on a space with one of these rectangle supply counters. So if you started your turn there, you could just slide an action marker to the purchase area. Or if you moved on to that space, you can use the extra action available after movement to slide your marker directly here. Again, as we go through the rest of the actions, I won't keep reminding you that as a part of movement, you can slide your action marker over to one of the other actions to perform it. But that's just something I want you to keep in mind. Now, when performing your purchase action, you can buy as much of the pictured cargo from the supply as you want, paying the cost shown for each piece, keeping in mind that you'll need the storage tokens in your truck to hold those bought goods. So with my $8 in scrap here, I can afford to buy 2 waters, but I only have space for 1. So I'll spend this 3 scrap and grab water from the supply to place here. After you're done buying, discard the supply counter into a face-up pile near the board and replace it with a new counter from the tray. If the counters in the tray ever run out, reshuffle the discarded tokens back into the tray and draw from there. Another action you can instead take on your turn is to deliver cargo if you're at a location with one of these demand tokens. To do this, you'll slide one of your markers to a delivery space and then return any amount of the pictured cargo from your truck to the supply, and you'll then gain scrap equal to the cargo's value on the cargo price wheel. So in this case, since I'm at a location demanding water and I have one in my truck, I could deliver it there for $6 in scrap that I'd gained from the supply. If I instead had 2 waters in my truck, I could deliver both and gain a total of $12 in scrap. After delivering, you place your black and white not welcomed standee on that location. While it's on a location, you may not trade there again until you've traded somewhere else, which will then move the standee to that location. Just keep in mind your standee doesn't stop others from trading there. Once a delivery is complete, you'll discard its demand token from that location to a face-up supply near the board. Then replace it with a new one from the tray. If you would ever run out of new tokens to draw, then simply reshuffle the discarded ones back into the tray and keep drawing. Although these double demand tokens don't start the game on the board, they may get revealed later. And if turning in cargo to one of them, you must deliver at least one of each type of symbol shown. So in this case, a player would need to deliver at least 1 food and 1 water cargo. After a delivery, you must also adjust the market prices, and you do this by looking at the demand token you just discarded and moving that cargo down by 1 on the market wheel. So in this case, water would decrease in value from 6 to 5. Then look at the new demand token just added to the board and increase those cargo values by 1. So in this case, both food and water would increase. In this way, the market value of any type of cargo is always its starting value as printed here, plus 1 for each of its symbols found on demand tokens in play. Another action you can instead perform for your turn is to activate an outpost by sliding a marker to one of these 2 spaces, while your truck is on a location with a symbol in the bottom left-hand corner. So let's go through each of these symbols that you'll come across and learn how they work. The symbol we're seeing with this truck means that the player gains $3 worth of scrap. Activating the Outpost with this symbol allows you to buy a Rad Shield mod for $4 in scrap. The cost of all mods is also shown on the mod shop template, and we'll learn about the effects of these mod tokens a little bit later. At this Outpost, you can instead hire a broker for $1, which is also a type of mod. This symbol means that you can buy any number of permanent truck mods from the shop except for the Rad Shield and Broker, which can only be purchased at the locations that we just saw. There are two main types of mods in the game: permanent ones, which are in these three columns here, and temporary mods, which are found in these slots. When a permanent mod is added to your truck, it stays in its space providing its effect until you decide to discard it. For example, to make room for a different mod that you want to install. Temporary mods, like this one, also go into the spaces of your truck, but once used for their effects, are returned to the mod shop. Aside from a few exceptions that I'll point out, there's no limit to the number or variety of mods that you can have as long as you have space to place them. That said, if you run out of tokens for a type of mod, it cannot be purchased again until some are returned to the supply. So let's take a moment right here and we'll go through the different mods and the benefits that they provide. As we saw earlier, the general storage can either hold one food, one water, or one artifact. And the weapon storage can hold one weapon or one artifact. Each gunner token lets you roll one extra die during combat rolls, while each machine gun adds one extra hit result to your final combat roll. Allies are a type of card we're going to learn about later, and you can always hire at least one of these. But for each sleeper cab you have, you'll be able to hire one extra. Each turbo you have installed lets you move an extra space during a move action. So if I slid my marker here, instead of just going up to 3 spaces, I could go up to 5. You may only have one piece of armor installed, and it's the only token that can go in this space. But while installed, if you take damage, you must put it on this mod. Then the second time you would take damage, you don't add any here, but instead remove the armor and this damage token. You may only have one digger installed, and it's only required if the Big Dig contract comes out during the setup. Likewise, you can only install one nuclear vault in your truck, and it's only used if the questionable decisions contract is in play. How individual contracts work are explained in detail in the rules, and those I'm going to leave you to discover on your own when they come up during your own play. You can never have more than one broker installed in your truck, but it grants you an extra $2 per completed delivery, no matter how much cargo you actually sold. You can also only have one Rad Shield, but this allows you to move through an irradiated space without needing to roll the Rad Check die. Those were all the permanent mods, but if you activate a location with this symbol, you can purchase temporary truck mods, and again, these, once used, are returned back to the supply. You can have any number of these delivery bonuses, and each one used during a delivery gives you an extra $5 in scrap. Though notice that some private contracts, like this one, require you to make a delivery worth $18 or more, and these $5 bonuses don't count towards that total. These are missiles, and before you roll combat dice, you can commit any number of them you have, and each will add 2 extra hits to your final result. This is an escort, and although the first printing of the rules doesn't say this, you can only have one of these at a time. But when you use it, you immediately move your truck to any space on the board. So those were all of the mods, and this handy board included with the game will also give you a brief summary of how they work. But now let's go back to looking at how some of the other outposts activate. At the dispatch, you can purchase any number of artifacts, but the cost for each is based on the highest uncovered value shown on this track. So if I wanted to buy 3 artifacts right now, it would cost me $7 for the first one, $8 for the next, and 8 again. When you deliver an artifact from your truck to fulfill a contract, return it to the final space of the artifact chart here. This symbol lets you hire an ally when you activate it. You then pay $3 in scrap and draw the top 2 cards from the ally deck, picking one to keep and the other that you'll discard to the bottom of the deck. Allies will provide you with an ongoing special ability as shown here, and in the rules you can find additional details about those abilities if you have any questions. Remember, you can always have one ally plus one more for every sleeper cab you have installed in your truck. And if you would ever gain more allies than you can hold, you can discard any extras to the bottom of the allied deck to make room for the ones you want. Symbols like these mean that you draw 3 cards from the top of the private jobs deck of the matching colored faction. You then examine them, pick one to keep, and the other 2 you'll return to the bottom of that deck. Incomplete faction jobs stay in your hand, hidden from the other players, and you can have at most 5 of these at one time. If you would ever gain more, then discard back down to 5, returning the extras to the bottoms of their decks. Faction jobs have a requirement listed on them, usually involving a delivery, and unless otherwise stated, only one cargo of the listed type is required to satisfy it. Once completed, place the job face up in front of you and collect the reward shown here. Some private jobs count as a priority first-class contract, and they'll show this symbol in their corner. Once you complete one of these, place one of your colored standees there, putting you closer to victory. Other jobs have multiple steps that you need to complete before you can claim their reward. For example, this one requires that you fulfill the demand for food and/or water 5 times. When you've completed at least the first step of a contract, place it face up in front of you, marking any fulfilled parts with one of your personal progress markers. Once all of those steps have been fulfilled, you can take those markers back and claim the reward. Finally, we have the depot. When activating this, you can both fully repair your truck at a cost of 3 scrap, removing all damaged tokens that might be on it, or you can buy these trailer parts for $8 each. At most, you can have 2 trailers attached to your truck, and each provides space for 4 more mods. So those are the rules for activating an outpost. Now let's learn about this bonus action. This is the one action you cannot slide to after performing a movement. In other words, this action has to be the only thing you're doing on that turn. Bonus actions are required for certain types of contracts, like this blue screen of death one. As you'll notice here in the rules, it indicates you need to use a bonus action to fulfill this requirement. This is why I'd recommend that you check the rulebook after seeing your public contracts, just to make sure there's no special rules like this required with them. If there's no action you want to take on your turn, instead you have to pass by sliding one of your markers over to this space. There's no benefit to doing this, and so you should only do that if it's your only option. Also keep in mind, this causes you to lose any momentum that you might have had. And those are all of the different actions you could take on your turn, and the round ends once all players have used all 5 of their action markers. At that point, everyone moves their action markers back to the available space on their board. The event deck is now passed clockwise, and the player taking it becomes the new first player, and they begin the next round by resolving the top card of the event deck. The game will continue like this until one player on their turn completes their 3rd unique priority first class contract, which will win them the game. Aside from single games, Wasteland Express Delivery Service can be played as a narrative campaign that tells a story and adds new rules each time you play. Now that said, participants don't carry things over from session to session, so this also means you can just pick any one scenario and play it as a single game. But I'll leave that for you to discover on your own. And that's everything you need to know to play Wasteland Express Delivery Service. If you have any questions at all about anything that you saw here, don't hesitate to put them in the comments below, and I'll gladly answer them as soon as I get a chance. But until the next episode, thanks for watching.